In the 21st century, that is, since the year 2000, the only country that has tested a nuclear weapon in the entire world has been North Korea. However, recent events and certain reports indicate that nuclear tests could return, and this is not good news. Especially after the Ukraine-Russia war, reports started to surface about activities in the long-dormant nuclear test sites of Russia and other major powers. We have started to relive the nuclear tensions that we erased from our memories and did not want to remember. The Russians even went a step further, holding votes in their parliaments to revoke international agreements that prevent the use and testing of nuclear weapons. Although this voting does not mean that the Russians will immediately start nuclear tests, it is an important sign that the process has started. So, are we going to witness the return of the most devastating weapons of mass destruction, in history? And with the ongoing tragedy in Palestine, this possibility has certainly become even more frightening. As of now, the agreement that prevents all countries from conducting such tests is actually not that strong. The first agreement on the limitation of tests was signed in 1963 between America, England, and the Soviet Union. According to this agreement, the testing of nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, underwater, or in outer space was prohibited, but underground tests were not covered. In 1996, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, was signed, and with it, all tests, including underground tests, were prohibited. However, there are still loopholes in this comprehensive agreement. 178 countries have signed this agreement and ratified it through their highest courts, making it effective. But interestingly, China, Egypt, Iran, Israel, and America have signed the agreement, but have not fully put it into legal effect. Yes, these countries have left a door ajar, so to speak. India, Pakistan, and North Korea are the countries that have not signed this agreement at all. I am sure many people are not aware of this loophole. Although many of us live in comfort because such an agreement exists, we can understand from this information that it is not a fully binding agreement. Especially since we have seen countless times in history that when necessary, the powerful countries do not really care about agreements. But of course, there is a reason why we are at ease. Despite these loopholes, these agreements have been effective. From the first nuclear test, the Trinity test in 1945, to the 1996 agreement, over 2,000 nuclear tests were carried out. Looking after 1996, India and Pakistan, which did not sign the agreement, conducted a few tests in 1998, and since then, they have been practically complying with the agreement. The only exception is North Korea, the only country that has continued these tests in the 21st century. North Korea, the only country that has tested a nuclear weapon since 2000, in the 21st century, conducted its last test in 2017, as you may recall. Despite this, it is necessary to mention that the political climate in the world is undergoing a very serious transformation. Apart from some internal turmoil and conflicts, relations, which had been relatively calm for a long time, have reached a disturbing level in recent days with the events between Israel and Palestine, especially following the Syrian civil war and then the Ukraine-Russia war in the last few years. Especially when we see that Israel has ignored many international agreements, written or not, in this war, the legitimacy of these agreements has started to be questioned. On top of this, Russia has started discussions to revoke the nuclear test bans that it enforced in 2000, with a unanimous vote in the Parliament Duma, except for the representatives who did not approve, on the past 17th of October. Of course, this has increased concerns regarding this matter. Parliament spokesperson Vyacheslav Volodin made a statement stating that this decision was taken due to America's failure to enforce the agreement and its irresponsibility concerning global security. However, as we mentioned, Russia has not yet completely lifted the bans and withdrawn from the agreement. It still appears to be one of the parties of the agreement. But this voting can also be interpreted as a kind of intimidation by Russia, indicating that it might restart these tests if necessary. Moreover, those who remember the news will recall that Russia tested its nuclear weapon systems in the past months. Of course, these systems did not have nuclear warheads. However, these are serious signals, very serious indeed. Additionally, there is a strong demand and inclination within Russia to start these tests again. Vladimir Putin also recently commented about testing these systems, stating that although nuclear tests are not on our agenda for now, we need to listen to the experts. If necessary, we need to test how the new weapons will work, he said. Of course, the issue with Russia is a subject we are more knowledgeable about. In fact, all three major powers are making similar preparations at the same time. According to a news report by CNN, expansion and modernization works are being carried out in nuclear test areas located in the Xinjiang region in the west of China. We know that similar works are being conducted in Russia's Arctic Sea test areas and America's facilities in Nevada. Experts agree that there are indications these three major powers are preparing for nuclear tests. However, other experts argue that despite this issue being on the country's political agendas, there is no rational explanation for testing a bomb, as the purpose of these types of tests is to understand the reliability of these weapons when they are first developed. Over time, this need decreases, and eventually, when the technology is understood to be reliable, there is no need to conduct tests. Today, most countries with nuclear weapons also have computer simulation systems that can test the functionality and effectiveness of these weapons. Another viewpoint highlights that even though the technology regarding nuclear weapons, known as atomic bombs, has changed, the fundamental scientific principles remain the same. We know how it works, we don't need to test it anymore. However, there is a big but here. We all know that the reason these tests are being brought up again is not to test the technology. In the current global political climate, issues are almost never resolved logically or in a way that benefits everyone. So if one day, any country decides to ignore all international laws and regulations, binding or not, and test the biggest bomb in their inventory, it could start a chain reaction. I made a pun here deliberately. This chain reaction could take us back to those dark days, and everyone might rush to show off the biggest bomb they have in a weird, who can reach the farthest, competition. Of course, the issue could escalate if one country decides to go a step further and put a large bomb on a plane or another delivery system to wipe out its enemy. At this point, considering the horror of current technologies, we could trigger a standoff that could wipe out a large part of the world. We don't want this to happen, of course. Surely humanity cannot be so foolish. Are we sure though? At least thinking and remembering this possibility and its horrific potential is a good thing, I think. My goal is not to spread fear, but we need to think about and remember these possibilities. We can be forgetful, forgetting what we have gone through, the horror of wars. It can seem like a computer game, especially if it's far away and we are confident it won't touch us. We might even enjoy fanning the flames of a war happening elsewhere. But remembering the horrific possibilities this potential could lead to, is something I want to emphasize. Let's say we referred to it as a simulation. Imagine a nuclear war breaking out. Of course, we hope it doesn't, but let's say it did. Yes, and depending on the scale of this war, when we consider the devastation it would bring, one of the outcomes to consider would be what's known as a nuclear winter. This refers to climatic changes caused by radioactive material dispersed into the atmosphere by nuclear weapons, leading to cooling effects and similar impacts. As a result, agriculture and livestock would undergo significant changes. According to a simulation conducted by a team, 27 million people would die immediately from the blast, and within the next 2 years, 255 million people would perish from famine. In the worst-case scenario, 360 million people would die from the initial explosions, and nearly 5 billion people would succumb to the ensuing famine. Terrifying, isn't it? Is it possible? Unfortunately, yes. Can it be prevented? Of course, if humanity is wise enough. We know there are no winners in war, and in a nuclear war, well, you know. Wishing for wisdom, and as always, until we meet again, take care. Best wishes.